In today's show, we're going to talk about DataFlex relationships, or as you probably call them, the common data service relationships. But the whole name change thing, I thought I'd embrace it. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into one-to-many relationships. We'll talk about many-to-many for a little bit and how to incorporate those in your Canvas apps. So talk a little bit about collections and filters and forms and patching, and just make sure that you guys kind of had your heads wrapped around how to use a very powerful piece of DataFlex, and that is those relationships. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with Power Apps 911, those guys. And today, we're going to dive into DataFlex relationships. And so as you probably know, right, the common data service has been renamed to DataFlex, so a little bit of confusion there, but we're going to call it both just to make our lives easy. And what I really want to do, though, is when we incorporate those into Canvas apps, there's a lot of little nuanced, neat features there that I think you would want to see a little more about. So kind of how we dive into those, how we don't have to use lookup formulas. We can just dot notation our way into them. I think that's pretty powerful. We're also going to look at how to patch them, because patching it's straightforward to me because I understand how it works, but it is a little different. So we'll make sure we understand how to patch those in. We'll incorporate a form for fun. We'll do a collection for fun. Just kind of hit some of the different nooks and crannies so you guys can kind of get your heads wrapped around that. And so, I don't know, let's just switch over to my desktop and take a look. So over here on my desktop, it's normally we want to dive in and kind of have a demo app, right? And I've already built an app kind of doing a dry run, but what I realized was it wasn't really, the app just said, oh look, I saved the data when you press this button. Woohoo, no one cares. So I thought instead of wasting time showing you that, we would just go build kind of all of this together. I thought that would make more sense. And so the first place to look is over here in our common data service, so data and then entities. And so I've made a new one here for Chewy Tracker, which we've used in the past, right? That was kind of the intro video, but we also have Chewy's Toys. And so Chewy's Toys is just a simple list that I made that just has a toy name and a toy description. Because I didn't want to overcomplicate this demo, so I thought we'd just pull in some very simple data. So this is going to be the data we're going to look up against, right? When we're looking at our relationship, this is where we're going to pull data in from. So if we go back over to entities, and so then in Chewy Tracker, let's just add a column to get that. So what we're going to do is we'll say add a field, and we'll just call it the toy. I don't know, I'm very descriptive with my names, the toy. And so then here under data types, we're going to hit the drop down. And if you scroll down a little bit, you're going to see that you have a lookup. And so when you do a lookup here, they do a pretty great job of making this easy to go. They're like, hey, all right, what table do you want to look out of? And it'd be nice if it said entity, since, whatever. But if we look in this list, we should see our good friend Chewy's Toys in here. There they are. And that's it, right? It's like done. No, nothing else to configure or do. Now, what's interesting about it, though, so we'll say done. And if we say save our entity, what's interesting is it is going to go create the relationship. So you might have noticed right over here, there is a relationships option. So it's going to do all the work for us there. And then what's even cooler is it's going to go to the target list, right? So Chewy's Toys, and it's going to show the relationship there as well. So giving us a lot of insight into what's going on. All right, so it's been created, the toy. So if you go to relationships, you can see the toy is mapped to Chewy's Toys right there. And so up here at the top also, you will notice add relationship. So you can come in here and configure a many to one or one to many or even a many to many. So you can walk through these manually. I could have said one to many. And so then it would have asked the same types of questions, right? So I could have just chosen Chewy Tracker again. There it is. Or not Chewy's Tracker, Chewy's Toys. And then like, hey, what field do you want to use? So I get a little bit more customization options over here. But if you're watching this video to learn how to set these up, you probably don't want to mess with any of this. But I want to make sure you guys knew all of this was over here. I'll be honest, I've never built an app with many to many. I don't even know where. I mean, I understand conceptually why, but I don't know. It's not what we're worried about today. We're worried about how do we use these mechanically. So we have a one-to-many relationship, and this is in Chewy Tracker. If we go back over to entities and go to Chewy's Toys, and then click on relationships, you will see that eventually, so it's not here yet, so let's do a refresh. But after a few minutes, sometimes it happens almost immediately, sometimes it takes 5 minutes. There you go, it happened pretty fast this time. So the toy, so then now over here, it knows that it has this relationship. So in Chewy's Toys, it knows that it is the object. So Not super critical, but I just thought it would be nice for you guys to know that, they kind of know about each other. All right, good enough. So let's create ourselves an app and kind of look at how we're going to work with this now that we've got some data. So we'll go over here to create. And then we could use, start from data, but that's no fun. So let's go Canvas app from blank. We'll call this relationship demos. And we'll do a tablet. I'm going to avoid all the relationship jokes about, how I'm down here, my wife is upstairs, and she's probably mad at me. We're going to avoid all the relationship conversations. But just think in your head, there's a lot of little dumb jokes we can make it along the way. All right, so now that this is ready to go, what we can do is let's just start with inserting a gallery so we can look at the core data first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, just do a vertical. And so then one of the great things about using DataFlex is I can just be like, all right, cool. I want to do a, what do I want to do? Let's type in Chewy. There we go. We're going to do Chewy's tracker. And so when we add Chewy's trackers, right, we get all of those entities that we previously created. We'll just kind of change the look over here to title, subtitle, and body. Perfect. And we're off and running. And if you go over here to data sources, you can see that got pulled in. And so with that all being done, one of the neat things that you can do is you can actually like dot notation your way into the relationships. But we haven't established any related data yet, so that's kind of hard to do. So what we might do is let's just add a form over here. So forms, do an edit form, right? Never a display form, always edit forms. And so what's our data source? It's going to be Chewy trackers. And now one of the things I want you to keep an eye on over here is notice that Chewy trackers is still our only data source. But so then now I'm going to say, hey, fields, I want to also add that field for the, what was it? We call it toy something, the toy. Very, very fancy. So say boom. And so when we added the toy, Power Apps is actually smart enough to say, oh, that one is pulling in related entity. And so then it pulled that and added that as a data source. I didn't have to add it as a data source. Just none of those perks. I didn't have to understand that I needed to add the data source. It's like, oh, you wanted to use that one, it would go. The same type of thing, like if we added a field and said, hey, I want to show the created by. We add that one in, and so it's going to get mad, and then eventually, there you go. It pulled in on its own the user's entity because that one is another lookup column. This just happens to be one they created for us. All right, let's get rid of that one though. We don't want any confusion. Boop, go away. Okay, so now we've got the toy. And if we go up here, of course, we need to set the item for our form. So we'll say item. And then for right now, we're going to do the thing that I don't like, but we're going to use gallery.selected. All right, it's okay when it's all on the same screen, I think. That's about the only time I think it's okay. So that looks good. So if we hit play, what we should be able to do is say, oh, look, toy. And so then now it is offering us all of the different data out of the toys list because it's looking up for that. We didn't have to do anything. It's just there. So we'd be like, all right, I want to set it to penguin. Now, I didn't give us a save button. Well, that was silly. So let's do a button. And we'll just have this button, submit form, form 1. Oh, that is not how you spell form 1. There we go. And so then now if we do that and we say, hold down the, or just press the button, that went. And so then over here, now here's one of the magical pieces. We can go this item. And so then now we're going to start to type in toy, the toy. Now the toy returns that entire record. And so obviously we can't show a record inside of a label. What we're going to do instead is now we can just do a dot. Look at that. What? Yes, this is one of the greatest things about it. Dot toy name. And so just like that, we've pulled in the penguin. We didn't have to write a lookup. We didn't have to add the data source. Power Apps just kind of figured it all out and said, here you go. Here's the data that you need so that you can come in here and do it. That to me is one of the best things. The other thing that's important to understand is that this is because the Common Data Service or DataFlex or DataFlex Pro, whatever we're calling it today, because it is a built-in data source, what will happen here is that these lookups happen just instantly like that, right? So you're not worried about performance problems in this type of nomenclature because of the fact that this data source doesn't have a middleman. It's just connected directly, inside of your app. So that's another nice little piece of functionality. Okay, so then now that that is pulled in, let's go over here for a second and let's look and see how did they get the list. And so in this case, what they did, if you hit the drop down, you can see that they used the choices function. They just said, hey, what are the choices for the toy? And so that's how they went and got the list of penguin and squeaker toy and tennis ball and all those fun things. Now, what we're going to look at here in a second, though, is there's another way to do this. So I typically I wouldn't have written it this way, but the form does, so it works. It's great, no problem, but that's the way that the form does it. That's why you're seeing it, because the form said, hey, you need to see the choices. Here are your choices. All right, so that's how it would work with a form. Now, if you wanted to come over here and you're like, hey, what about if I wanted to put this into a collection? What happens? Well, that's a fair question. So I'm going to grab a button, throw it down here. And we're going to say, hey, button, what I want you to do is clear collect Cole Chewy. I don't know. Creativity not working. And then we'll do Chewy trackers. And so then that would put all of that data into a collection for us. And so then over here, if we go and we're like, hey, Cole Chewy, womp womp, look, are the toy. It doesn't throw an error, but it is blank. So this is super frustrating. Like, wait, so I can't use collections and still have all the power relationships? Ha, calm down, Mofrere. So if we press the button again, it comes in. Ooh. So what is that? That is explicit column selection at work. So the first time that I pressed the button, it said, hey, where are all the different columns that Shane is using with his collection? And with the first press of the button, I wasn't using the collection anywhere, so it really just grabbed like a couple of key pieces of data. It didn't grab the whole data set. But then we went over to the gallery and we added Cole Chewy to the gallery. And in the gallery, we're using dog's activity twice, and then we're using the toy.toy name. So it said, oh, I need to fetch that next time I get the collection. So that's why when we pressed the button the second time, this got pulled in. So make sure that if you are using this type of notation and then you introduce collections, that you're not like getting frustrated because the app just won't show you what you want. Sometimes it is just because Power Apps is trying to be smart, and so the first time you ask for the data, maybe on app on start, you didn't need any of that, but now in the studio you changed your design and now you need more data. You've got to go re-trigger it to get that again. All right, and that's all coming from our friend over here called explicit column selection, which is on by default, which is a great feature. It makes your apps a lot faster without you having to do or think or do anything else, which is a nice feature. So anyway, that was a great example of it in action in a place where I was shaking my fist like, why did I lose the data? I didn't really lose the data. I just needed to recollect it again now that I was using it so that the collection or the clear collect function knew to get it. Okay? So the next thing I want to do though, right? We all know that I don't use forms very often. So I feel like cheap and dirty showing you how to do this in a form because that was super easy. So let's go to another new screen. And let's do this again, but this time let's do it with Patch. So what I'm going to do, throw my gallery over here, and then we will say, hey, I want you to be Chewy again. So there's Chewy trackers. We'll just change the thing. I need to add a picture to all the Chewy tracker activities, so that way it looks a little nicer. Okay, so we got that again. So then how would we kind of do the same type of design, but without a form? Fair enough. So we'll throw a text input over here. Nope. And so then what we're going to do, we're going to say, hey, your default is gallery2.selected.dogs activity. So that gets us walking. Let's throw a label on top of that and be like, hey, this is my activity. Activity. I wanted to autocomplete the word activity for me. And so then now what we'll also do here, we'll grab another label. We'll throw it down here. And so then this is going to be the toy. The toy, and so then now we've got to kind of build this ourselves. And let's make this a little bigger. This does not look big enough to me. No, is that a little easier to see? I hope it is. All right, so there's the toy, and so then input, and then the drop down. And so then we'll throw the drop down over here. And so now remember I told you last time they used that choices thing, but that's not the way I would have written it. So how would I have written it? Would have been even easier. I would have just said Chewy toys. A bouncy ball he only wants to fetch up. As fast as I put this over here, I got to pull it back. And so then I would have said, hey, you show me toy name. Perfect. And then, of course, what I wanted to do is I got to set the default to this. So we'd go up here and say default. and you're not going to be the number 1. That would be silly. You're going to be gallery 1 or gallery 2 dot selected. And now gallery 2 dot selected. Oh, that's right. And we need to then pull in the name. Oh, that is not it. Gallery 2 selected. Oh, and so in here we can just do toy. The toy is still a record. Oh, that's right. And then toy name. Ah. So took a little noggin, right? Because gallery 2 selected was a record. In that record, I wanted to field the toy. And then, but the toy field was also a record. And so from that record, then I needed the actual name of the toy. So you just have to slowly walk yourself down it. But the beauty of it is if you were using other data sources, we might have had to do lookups inside of lookups. Right? It could have gotten really complicated. With the Common Data Service here, we were just able to dot our way into it. And so then there's the toy. And so then now let's do a very simple patch, right? We'll do the hard one in a second, I promise. But the simple one is we would just say, hey, I want to patch Chewy trackers. Which record do I want to do? I want to do the gallery 2.selected. And what am I going to patch? Well, we would say, all right, I want to patch the activity to whatever is in that text input. And so we'll go over here and be like, hey, what's in that text input? It's called text input 1. Very fancy name. I should rename that, but you guys do not enjoy watching me rename things. So there we go. And then to patch our toy, the toy, this one is just same easy. Drop down 1 dot selected. Close a curly, close that. And so that would patch our data. Now, why is it I'm using drop down selected? Because remember, the toy is a record, right? It is a record from that other entity list. And so since it's a record, all we need to do is pass a record over. And so in this case, drop down 1 selected, because our drop down selected is the whole selected record that came from, oh, not there. Where's items? Came from Chewy's Toys. So because all the pieces connected, this is actually not that complicated because, you know, we're working in records here. And that's one of the reasons I always kind of harp on you guys to think about, is it text, is it record, is it table? Because if you understand these things are all records, these dots should be connecting pretty fast. And so now let's just hit play. Let's change the toy from the penguin to shoes and like that. And so if we go over here, we'll just change this to say, show me the toy dot name, shoes, nice. And look, we can even pull in another field. So the toy dot toy description. And so walking shoes, he doesn't chew them up, he collects them. Yeah, that's right. Chewy likes to get my kids' shoes and put them in Chewy's bed. Doesn't ever chew on them, just likes to pile them up. Maybe it's Chewy's way of saying kids should clean up after themselves. I don't know. Anyway, that is what, what's going on here. And so that's a pretty simple patch. Now, the last one you might be thinking, though, is what if I wanted to update all of them? I don't want to use a drop down. I want to change them all to tennis ball, right? I just want to have one fell swoop update all my records. That's a fabulous question, and the last one that we'll kind of dive into here. So what we can do here is we will go right here and we will say, hey, I want to, so we want to go through them all. And so the first time I wrote this, I started out to kind of go after for all. And what I remembered was that for all can't update its own data set. So instead, what I did was I wrote one that I don't use enough with you guys called update if. And so update if, you pass it a collection or a table. So in our case, Chewy trackers. And so then you're going to say, hey, whatever condition gets met. Remember, I just told you I want to do all of them. So one of the super nerd tricks that I use is you can just type in true here. So every record that is true, which just basically means every record that's in that data source, I'm going to update. So this is one of my little, ninja things that I like to use when I want to just update everything. I'm like, hey, update true. And remember, this same type of thing would work in a filter or a lookup. If you just wanted to get a record, or in case of filter, you wanted to return all the records. I don't know why you'd want to filter for all the records, but sometimes you do. It happens. You can just use true. That gets everything. Every record will get matched. Very cool, huh? So then it's like, hey, what do you want to update? Well, what I want to update is I wanted to set the toys. And so I wanted to set it to tennis ball. All right. Like that, and that, and that. Womp womp. That's not going to work. Why? Hover, it'll tell you. The toy column in the data source, you're expecting a record, right? It wants that whole record from another list, and you're using a text type. Oh, that's right. So what you have to do is you need to go look up the record that matches that. So what you're going to do here is you're going to say, all right, what I want is I need to do some type of lookup. And now you're tempted to do it here, but if you do it here, then it's going to have to look it up every single record, and it's going to be a little bit slow. So what I would prefer you do is you go up here, and we're going to use my good friend with, right? With is always one of my answers to how do I make something faster. And so with, I'm going to say, hey, X. I don't know why I use X, but I do. And we're going to do, say, lookup from Chewy Toys. And what condition do I want to use? I want to find the one where toy name, there it is, equals tennis ball. Like that. And so then, and I got to put a little curly bracket around that. And so then that is going to go get that record one time and store it in a little temporary variable called X. And so then now I'm just going to be here, hey you, I want you to be patched as X. We'll go there, and we got to close out our update if. And so then if I press this button now, hold the button, let's make sure it works. Fingers crossed. Boom! Everybody updated to tennis ball by pressing this one button. So not exactly something you're going to do, but man, there's a lot of mechanics here for you to kind of think about. But really the thing I want you to understand is that if you are patching or updating, you have got to return a record. So up here, we returned the whole record by using drop-down selected. Up here, we returned the whole record by doing a lookup. And so we're using update if. It doesn't matter. If you were just using patch directly, it would be exactly the same syntax. You just need to look up and pull in that whole record. Okay? So those are a couple pieces I wanted to explain about that. Now, what if we want to filter this? I didn't practice this in the demo, but now I feel like I want to show you. So what if we want to filter on that column? So what if we said we want to filter on Chewy Tracker, and then we're going to say the toy. And so we know that the toy is a record. So we could, let's try this one first. Let's just do toy name. And then we could probably say equals tennis ball. And so does this return all the records? It does. Very nice, right? So that's pretty straightforward to do. And let's just confirm that. Let's just change this one to be, we'll change the first record, the walking record to be penguin. Patch that. There you go. It drops out of our list. So filtering based on a lookup or relationship wasn't too bad. The other thing to keep in mind though is if I had the record already there. So for example, if I had our drop down, if I wanted to filter by what's in that drop down, right? What was that? Drop down 1? Pretty sure it is. So I could have come up here and said, hey, filter where the toy, because that's a record, equals drop down 1 dot selected. And so if I do that, what's it mad about? This creates a circular reference. Oh, that's because they're tied together. That's fair. Okay, I agree. Control copy, control paste. Put you up here. So now you are drop down 1 underscore 1. Or drop down 1 underscore 1. And then just take his default and say, hey, your default is no longer, oh, drop down 1. Your default. This is what happens when I get off script. You don't have a default. There we go. What are you mad about? Gallery 2, data type. All right. So, but now you can see it's kind of mad. So if you do this, edit the formula bar, the delegation warning, because it's like, hey, I can't pass the data this way. So you wouldn't want to, you wouldn't want to do this in a delegable scenario, but it's just worth noting that this is kind of how I think about it. So since that doesn't work, I bet what I could probably do, right? This is where we get into Shane exploring time. We will say set var chosen item. What are we going to set it to? Gallery, or no, drop down 2, drop down 1 underscore 1 dot selected. There you go. So we'll put this into, we'll change that one to Penguin. So let's change that back to Penguin, hit the button. And so then now, instead of drop down one selected, if we use our var chosen item, what is in var chosen item? It's the Penguin. I would have expected that to match. Let's try again. Nope. All right. Well, I guess the moral of the story is that, we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble here without paying a lot of attention. And so instead, what we should have done, what do I want? I want Penguin. Oh, I'm not changing that. So what I probably would have done was the toy name equals drop down 1 _ dot selected dot toy name. And so then now, with all that said, thank goodness, we don't have any delegation warnings. And if we change this drop down, we're now changing our filters. So that's the type of stuff that I usually saw. I didn't just readily off the top of my head knew it. But what I did was I kind of just a little paw here, a little paw there. And then I was able to kind of work my way back to this solution, getting what we wanted in a repeatable manner and without delegation. And it all makes a lot more sense to me because instead of just having the answer, I kind of, like I said, kind of scratched at it. Okay, so those are two things. The last one I wanted to throw was just a little bonus thing because when I first started exploring these relationships, I thought, man, I need to know the primary key and the ID. This was back years ago before this worked. So one of the things that is not awesomely aware for a lot of us also is if you're hey, what is the primary key column here, right? So in SharePoint, the primary key column is ID. SharePoint just creates one called ID. It's always there. And so in your entities, the unique identifier, as they call it, or I call it the primary key, whatever you want to call it, what it is always going to be is it's going to be the entity's name as a field. So in this case, it is Chewy Tracker. And so then there you can see there is the GUID that is the primary ID. So if you're looking at, in this case, Chewy Tracker is the entity, then the key is, or the primary ID is Chewy Tracker. You shouldn't need it for anything, but it was something I wanted to find, and it really kind of confused the you-know-what out of me that it was the name itself. So I wanted to throw that in there for you as well. Okay, whew, that's a lot. So hopefully this helps you guys start to wrap your head around, these relationships. Once again, when it comes to, the Common Data Service, or as Microsoft just renamed it, DataFlex or DataFlex Pro or DataFlex for Teams, whatever it might be, these are a very set piece of functionality you need to check out. So, and if you're new to all this, remember I have 3 or 4, this might be the 4th video now on this particular data set or this data source. So go check those out. I'll leave a link below. I think I made a playlist out of that already, so you can kind of work your way through and make sure you're starting to wrap your head around it, because I'm telling you guys, this data set, DataFlex or Common Data Service, it is going to become more and more integral into our Power Apps worlds. So I want to kind of keep getting you guys prepared, keep nudging you to get there. All right. And with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day. Before you go, be sure to click on the subscribe button over here so that way you'll be notified when new videos come out. If you need any help or you want to work together, whether your problem's big or small, check us out at Power Apps 911. We do it all. I rhymed. Or if you're looking for more formal training offerings, we have those linked up here somewhere. So check them out. Thanks and have a great day.